Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's Artie. You know who it is. Today we have another guest this week. This is ArchAngel. He has been on my comments and in my live streams earlier. We've had our own back and forth before. And today we're going to have a more structured discussion than we had last week. This time it's going to be more of a... we're going to have 10 questions for each other. We'll have chances to respond, and we'll go from there. So please introduce yourself, and I'll set the timer.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Artie, for hosting this live chat. And I'm ArchAngel for Truth. Basically, I would consider myself a Christian sovereign constitutionalist, not a sovereign citizen, but ultimately I do believe in the Constitution, and I certainly believe in the Declaration of Independence, and of course, most importantly, I believe in God's Word. Many of you do know me already. Some of you have blocked me, but that's okay. And ultimately, I believe the best way to resolve any issues in the matter of law is ultimately to go to the original source of all law, which is God's law. And so, with that being said, I do have a scripture here I'd like to begin with. It's taken from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 12. For our wrestling is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this darkness of this age, and against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. With that being said, let us begin.
All right. Thank you very much for that. So, like I said, this is, hey, what's up, D-Gen? This is ArchAngel for Truth. As I said before, the way we're going to do this is, and that we agreed upon beforehand, is we are going to have 10 main questions that we have for each other from there, and we'll be alternating back and forth. From there, we are allowed to have up to 2 follow-up questions, and we're given leeway to explain ourselves. In terms of answering the questions, we're given leeway to explain ourselves, but we all both understand to make sure that we don't end up, going off on a tangent, rambling, that sort of thing. So try and keep ourselves around 2 minutes to respond. So in that regard, I get to go first, and the first question that I have for you, Archangel, is: do you believe yourself to be subject to any laws passed by man, i.e., a local, state, or federal statute passed by legislature? If not, why not?
Well, that's two questions. But so, do I believe that I'm subject to the laws of men? The answer would really depend on what the laws are. So, yes, in some sense, but no in others, depending on what it is.
Okay, so if you say depending on what it is, what do you have a criterion? I guess that'll be my last follow up. Do you have a criterion in which what laws you feel obligated to follow?
Yes. So, the laws that I would choose to follow would be those laws that do not inhibit any of my inalienable rights or freedoms, and that I believe are beneficial. So, with that being said, ultimately, I would decide whether or not each law was something that I needed to observe or not. So, is that
Okay,
your
I mean,
question?
yeah. I mean, I'll probably have to. I only actually have 8 main, just in case
Okay.
I would have 2, and I might have a follow up to that in a later on. So I'll go ahead and end it right there, and then it's now you can ask me something now. It's your turn.
Yes. So, basically, my question is I'd like you to respond to what Judge Neil Gorsuch says as it pertains to the Ninth Amendment and ultimately how it is that rights are or sovereignty is determined and how individually that impacts the individual and the state. So I have a recording of him,
Okay.
which I'll play for you, and then you can tell me what you think of that.
Sure.
So I'll go ahead and play that recording, and gotta put it up here. Let's see. Okay. I don't know why it's not starting up here. Give me a second.
Sure.
Let's see.
Not there yet.
Well, yeah, I have the recording on my laptop, and I don't know why everything is just like frozen up.
Right.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on from that one, and I'll go to one of my other questions, and I'll go back to that.
Well, give me a second here. I don't know if you'd be able to hear it, but I think I might. Because before going live, I did go into some of your videos, and I think I know which video you're referring to. That had the Goresuch recording. Let me see if I have it here.
Gave the federal government
there it is. I think this is it. I don't know now. I don't know if you can hear it though.
Enumerated powers.
I doubt it. But let me go ahead and present my screen. Maybe you can hear it from there. Give me 1 second.
I don't know why this thing is completely frozen.
So, where is it? Is this it? Can you see my screen?
I'm trying to get back to the screen, and everything's just frozen. I don't know what's going on with this. Yeah, I
Muted.
can't.
Okay.
Can't
In that
seem
case,
to do anything. It's just everything.
we can move on then to a different question then.
Yeah. So my question is, and I get this a lot from people that are anti-sovereign
Okay.
or don't believe in the Declaration of Independence. They say that it's not a legal document. What is your belief as to the legal standing of the Declaration of Independence?
My standing on the Declaration of Independence is that it is not a legal document. It is a statement of principles.
Okay. So I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Are documents that are ratified by both houses a legal document?
Are ratified by both houses of Congress? Oh, and he's gone. Oh boy. So, so I was actually kind of prepared for this question. We're gonna wait until he comes back and see if he can come back to us. But I was kind of prepared for this question because again, this along with the Ninth Amendment are certain questions that he's asked about in his previous videos. So I actually did have responses to it, to both. But let's see if we can get him back here. Yeah, the Declaration of Independence is a Karen complaint form of the 1780s, 1776. The Karens of the colonies couldn't get their complaints heard by the manager of Great Britain, and so they decided that they were going to take their ball and go home. Hold on, let me see if I can get him back on. No, Alpha. This video is not sponsored by G Fuel. For fuck's sake. Oh boy. Damn it. And everything was working fine beforehand. He had joined in about half an hour before. He sounded fine. I sounded fine. That's why I had this thing us talking to each other half an hour before to avoid situations like this. And here we are. Wondering if he's coming back. Damn it, and I had some good stuff too. Corporation cut him off. It may be he's just restarting his laptop, so I'm gonna give him some time at least. So, and to join back in. Now's the time to chug? Yeah, probably. Video chat is a corporate fiction. I mean, what isn't these days? Well, I mean, should just do it on Discord. Yeah, probably. But I mean, it does require them to have to go through another platform, you know, have a new account on Discord. Whereas most of these guys I talk to on YouTube, they already have a YouTube account or a Google account, so going through Google Meets is kind of an easy affair. They don't have to sign up for anything new. You know what I mean? Norristown operator was dismayed to see me in a Cowboys hat with Heretic, at least be a Giants or Jets. Why? Why would I be any of those things right now? And for the record, just because I'm living in New Jersey and have been living in New Jersey's not my hometown. I spent 11 years in Texas, so I ain't no a bandwagon Cowboys fan from the Northeast.
There we go.
Hey,
I don't know what happened.
Welcome
I was
back.
Disconnected.
No worries.
So I never got the answer to my question on
So the question you had was is a bill passed by both houses considered
a legal document?
Well, if it's passed by both houses and the president, yes. And, you know, signed by the president.
We know that it was. The Declaration of Independence was.
By Congress?
Yes.
Which Congress, though?
By the very first one.
The Continental Congress?
I don't know if it's called the Continental Congress, but basically those individuals that chose to agree upon it at the time of its ratification.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the because that was actually part of my questioning was regarding this because like I said, I saw a couple of your videos previously, so I had a question on this very topic.
Okay.
But I can incorporate that here. You say that it was ratified by Congress, but the thing is that the Declaration was decided upon and ratified by the Continental Congress of 1776. The Constitution itself wasn't ratified until 1789 or 1789 or 1791. So there's no way that the Congress as we know it today is the same Congress that ratified the Declaration of Independence. Would you agree?
I wouldn't agree.
Why not?
And well, basically what you're saying is that because one was done before the Constitution, that it makes the other invalid.
Well, I'm not saying that the Declaration isn't necessarily invalid.
Or not?
It's
I mean,
referred
they
to.
both abide by the same process.
I will see. That's where I disagree because like I said, the Congress, because there were two Congresses before the Congress that we know of, the House and Senate even existed. There was the first Continental Congress that uh, drafted and ratified the Declaration of Independence, and then there was the Second Continental Congress that came together and formulated the Constitution itself. From there, upon ratification in 1791, then you had the actual Congress that was elected by the first, 13 states.
Right. So, what then really is the difference between the first one in the way it was established and the second one? Basically, you have individuals that chose to establish a governmental system. All they are is people. There's nothing different about them. They're just each deciding to establish a means of governing over them. So I guess my question would be to you is, what's the difference between the first that established the Declaration of Independence compared to the second, where you have the people of these 13 states, man-made states, that decided to do the same in a little different way?
Well, because the first was a declaration of, as the title, so it's a Declaration of Independence. At the time, the 13 colonies were still under British rule, and in fact, even after they won the Revolutionary War, they spent 10 years under an entirely different system of government before the Constitution itself. It was under the Articles of Confederation. So there was an entire system of government in place for 10 years between the end of the Revolution and the formulation of the Constitution. So that's the difference. One is the Congress of the Constitution is under a separate and new form of government. And even if there's overlapping members of the same body, there are more than likely members who were part of the first Continental Congress who ended up becoming the first representatives and senators of the respective states. Who were the same. That does not mean that that you would point to the Declaration as an actual enacted body of law when it wasn't ratified by the first Congress in the first place. It was an entirely separate entity.
Well, okay. So I hear what you're saying, that it's a separate entity. So that doesn't make it invalid, though. If we're saying the Constitution is valid because some dudes decide to say it's valid, and the same process was established for the Declaration of Independence, you have a situation where you have an understanding being established of, okay, what's the purpose of government? Okay. And so in even judicial decisions are determined by their understanding of laws that are established by the legislature. So if judges are required to take into consideration that, then why would you certainly say that it's not valid today?
Well, I would disagree. Well, here's the thing. I would not characterize my position as the Declaration of Independence being invalid. My statement is that the Declaration of Independence is not a law from which somebody could point to in a cause of action. In other words, somebody cannot go file a lawsuit against an entity under the premise and cite to the Declaration of Independence, saying, you know, the county, Monmouth County, deprived me of my pursuit of happiness for X, Y, and Z reason. That's where I'm coming from when I'm saying that the Declaration of Independence is not a law in that sense. Now, it is referenced. Now, I've seen plenty of decisions where the Declaration is referenced in terms of interpreting the intent of the founders and the framers of certain aspects of the Constitution, such as, for example, in the DC versus Heller case for gun rights, Justice Scalia pointed to the Declaration of Independence as a reference to understanding the intent of the framers at the time. But when it comes to this is an actual law that I can cite to, in other words, this person in the same way that somebody said this person deprived me of my Fourth Amendment rights, I can't simply say this person would deprive me of my right to life, liberty, and property. That's where I'm coming from when it comes to the Declaration.
Okay, well, I mean, I would say that that's, you know, a personal decision to view it that way. You know, just as we view the Constitution and we accept the Constitution, that's, I would also say, something that is a personal decision. You know, I mean, ultimately, if you look at what is the Constitution, I mean, when you really boil it down to its most basic, fundamental, what it is, what is the Constitution?
Is that a separate question you're asking me? I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm asking you, what is the Constitution?
It is a document that sets out the system of government for the United States of America and also lays the foundations of its powers and limitations on powers, as well as, when we're including the Bill of Rights, enumerating what rights the citizens of the United States have.
Okay. So a follow-up to that would be, would you not agree that the Constitution is a contract?
Not in the literal sense, no.
Okay.
It's a social contract. In other words, it is an agreement amongst the populace saying, you know, here are the rights that we are entitled to. Here are the powers that government is granted, and the expectation is that they are subject to the laws that are duly passed under that Constitution.
Okay. Well, that I would say is open to interpretation. Do you have a question you'd like to ask?
Sure. And this guy, and like I said, while you were gone, I was also mentioning this to the others. You, in your videos, and I've noticed that you assert that the right to travel is protected under the 9th Amendment. Do you have any precedential backing to this, or is this a personal argument that you have formulated yourself?
Well, it would actually go to the video that I wanted to play for you, and I think I might be able to play it now. Let me see if I can. And let's see here. I'm going to see if this is going to work this time and how I would answer that based upon what even Supreme Justice Goresuch, although he was just a nominee at the time, we know that he's a justice now. So I'm going to go ahead and play that video now that I have it.
It's not been much interpreted by the Supreme Court. There are different views about its effect and its meaning. And I don't doubt there'll be cases and controversies in which I would, if confirmed, and maybe even if I'm not, asked to construe the meaning of that. It's one of those amendments that hasn't had a lot of judicial attention. We've talked about some others.
There's a publication in 1950 I read called The Forgotten Ninth Amendment.
Right.
Well, that's 60 years ago. It was
and
forgotten then.
Senator Lee's written a book that includes some discussion of this as well.
Judge Bork referred to it one time as an ink blot, seemingly implying that it could just be ignored. Is there any precedent that we need to know about to understand the Ninth Amendment as it comes down through the court?
There are amendments that have been less interpreted and more interpreted. The Ninth Amendment is one of those that has been less interpreted, Senator.
What's the best way to understand how the Constitution divides power between the federal government, the states, and the people? And in particular, how do we know whether or not some power that has not been specifically enumerated and given to the federal government, since the people give the government power, the government doesn't give us rights. The people gave the federal government certain enumerated powers. If it's not enumerated, how do we know if it belongs to the states or to the people?
Senator, we've talked a lot about federalism in this last few days. The people in this country are sovereign. As Lincoln said, it's a government by the people, for the people.
Okay. So, as Judge Neil Gorsuch pointed out, there hasn't been a lot of cases as it pertains to the Ninth Amendment. But a fair reading of the Ninth Amendment is clear as to its meaning. So I would go ahead.
I would say, is it?
Absolutely.
Because the reason I say that is because even in that audio quote, in the beginning, I don't know who was saying it, but they said that the Ninth Amendment is subject to interpretation. Was it not?
Right, but he also says that the Ninth Amendment is determined by the people. That's what he says. He says the people are sovereign, not the states, the people. So, I mean, that's coming from a Supreme Justice, and so we can say that it doesn't exist, that individual sovereignty doesn't exist, but I would say that when a Supreme Justice is saying otherwise, there may be a legitimate reason not to jump away from individual sovereignty.
Well, the reason I would say that is because for those in the chat who are unaware, here's the exact language of the Ninth Amendment. Quote, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed or to deny or disparage others retained by the people, end quote. Now, my issue here is, and I think this is a reason why the Ninth Amendment has not been brought up a lot by SCOTUS, is because what are those others? How do you define what those others are? Those other rights, and that is left open to interpretation. So whether so going from there, anybody can imprint whatever they feel like into the Ninth Amendment and say, that was, that's one of those other rights that's not stated in the Bill of Rights, but it's one of those that the Ninth Amendment covers. And I think many judicial scholars have said that that's not exactly the right way to look at the Ninth Amendment.
Well, if we go, now I don't know, what your stance is on determining laws, whether you're a textualist or you believe that it changes with the times. But if we go according to the text, what the Ninth Amendment actually says, it tells us who are the ones that determine what the ninth is. Basically, it says that the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by who? The people. Doesn't say the states, doesn't say the government, and it doesn't say the judiciary. It says the people. And that helps to clearly demonstrate that the people are those that are sovereign.
Would you say that a duly elected legislature that is voted into office by the people to be representatives of said people?
Would I say if they're representatives of the people? Is that your question?
Yes.
They're representatives to those people who choose to accept them as representatives of them. You see, what many individuals fail to realize is the fact that even the Constitution, those constitutional rights that we believe in and that we hold to be so sacred, were at some point unenumerated. And so the fact that they're now being enumerated doesn't give them any greater weight than those that are unenumerated. It just means a group of people decided to list a couple of the rights that we have, inalienable rights.
So going back to my original question, you are saying that the right to travel, you are interpreting the Ninth Amendment to include the right to travel as among those unenumerated rights that's protected under the Ninth Amendment. Is that correct?
Absolutely, but not just. So there is a difference between the right to travel and the right to drive, but I would say that the Ninth Amendment covers both.
Okay. The reason why I say this, the reason why I brought this question up, is because SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, that's what I call SCOTUS, by the way, if you didn't know. SCOTUS in Shapiro versus Thompson explicitly stated that they do not ascribe a citizen's right to travel, and explicitly a right to travel, not to right to drive, throughout the United States to a particular constitutional provision. In other words, what in the footnote of Shapiro versus Thompson, they reference state and federal cases that point to federal and state courts referring to that the right to travel is under the Privileges and Immunities Clause of Article 4, the Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment, the Commerce Clause, the Due Process Clause, and the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. There's no mention of the Ninth Amendment in any of those cases that SCOTUS cites to. So, going back to my original question, do you think that your reference to a Ninth Amendment argument is backed up by precedent, or is this something that you have your own viewpoint about? This is an original argument that you're making.
So, when a Supreme Court chooses to review a case, it does so based upon the arguments presented. And so if a Ninth Amendment argument isn't put by the individuals that are pleading their case, then they're not going to review that. And that's a common occurrence within many court cases. If you choose not to bring something up in a court case, that's your failure. That's your personal failure on that level. And many times they won't even let you reopen that case on those arguments because you failed to bring them up. You know that as a lawyer that is true. So my statement is that those that argued for the right to travel failed to even present the Ninth Amendment as an argument that they would have argued before the Supreme Court. That was their choice. I don't know why they didn't choose to argue it. So when when the Supreme Court made its decision,
Mm-hmm.
it tailored its decision based upon the arguments presented, not other possible constitutional arguments that were not presented.
Okay, so just again, I would just to get so I can get a definitive answer, and then you can ask me something. This argument that you're presenting of the Ninth Amendment is something that you are bringing up yourself, because largely nobody has brought it up yet. Is that what I'm saying? Is that what I'm getting from you?
Are you asking me, has anyone else used this argument in a right to travel case? Is that what you're asking?
Essentially, yes. Correct.
Oh, okay. So as far as I'm aware of, no one I know, and I have looked for cases on this, has used the Ninth Amendment, but as was clearly indicated by Justice Gorsuch, that the Ninth Amendment is really something that the Supreme Court or the courts in general has done very little in addressing. So, to be fair, I would say that it's still something that is open to debate.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Your turn now.
Okay. So my question is as it pertains to the 10th Amendment. And I'll read the 10th Amendment so that, everybody has an understanding of it. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. What does it mean, or to the people?
Sorry, can you say that again? You said, what does it mean to the people?
Yeah, so basically we have people that argue that the power to police people by the states is reserved in the 10th Amendment. Okay. It does say that the power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, but it also adds or to the people. My question to you is, what does it mean when it says or to the people?
I would say it means that the rights of the people are reserved in respect to, at least in my understanding and in my learning of the law, that it's respectively protected depending on the circumstances of each case that's brought before it. In other words, there are times when the 10th Amendment was just as quiet in terms of interpretation as the 9th Amendment. In recent years, that it has been brought up more often, particularly in terms of Commerce Clause interpretation. So I would say that the rights of that phrase "to the people" is relatively limited, because the 10th Amendment is largely reserved in interpretations regarding the sovereignty of the states. In other words, the states' police powers, their powers to handle affairs of property, of family, of criminal law. So the issues of to the people, I feel, is about as quiet, or isn't as explored as you would say with the 9th Amendment.
So is your private interpretation on this backed by any court cases that you're aware of?
I can point to you the more recent cases that have Supreme Court cases that have dealt with the 10th Amendment, And in those cases, they are specifically discussing the authority of the states to pass laws and not necessarily an interpretation of what the phrase to the people means.
Well, it says or to the people.
Or to the people means. That's what I mean.
Yeah. So basically, then your interpretation really isn't backed by anything the judges have set out. If we accept their interpretation,
well, no, I guess no more than your interpretation that the right to travel is covered by the 9th Amendment.
So I'm just wanting to understand what it is that causes you to have that interpretation, and as you say, my interpretation of the 9th, I would say that a fair reading of the 9th would render that conclusion, and the fact that the Constitution itself, those enumerated rights, were at some point unenumerated. So, I mean, I would say that at least there's a historical representation that backs what I'm saying. I don't know of any historical judicial decision that would come to the conclusion that you've suggested based upon what or to the people means in the 10th Amendment. Now, I will say that I am part of a group, and it's basically the 10th Amendment Center, Law Center.
Mm-hmm.
And I've presented this very same argument. And the gentleman who runs it, his name is Michael Bolden. And basically, he would agree with my view that the or to the people gives to the people the same powers that the states have. And he's an attorney as well. I just want to make clear to your audience and everyone that watches this, I'm not an attorney. What actually got me into all this was an incident where my car had gotten seized, and actually it was no fault of my own actually at the time, but basically someone had moved my vehicle out onto the street, and it got taken basically. And so from then on, I decided, hey, you know what? I need to understand what's going on here, because as far as I'm concerned, and most individuals would say, that's theft. And ultimately, I do want to say that, even if we read the 10th Amendment, as you say, that the states have these police powers. The problem is you wouldn't have states without people. So the very idea that a fictional object has sovereignty over those that created it seems absurd.
I don't know why you would think it's absurd. I mean, the concept of a state, nation, country having sovereignty over the citizenry has long been a thing. It's not exactly a new concept. The concept that the state is subject to the will of the people through elective representation, that's relatively new in terms of human history. But the concept of a sovereign of one, or a sovereign of a governance has long been a thing. It's not exactly a new concept here.
Well, I'm not saying that it is a new concept. I'm just saying that it's a concept that is man-made. It's, it's not original to the founding of creation, basically. I mean, let's see. I forgot whose turn it was on the question.
Oh,
so
I want to. Here's one of my questions that goes in
okay.
directly into this. And it's kind of a hypothetical, and it kind of goes into your story. If you were wronged by someone, i.e., somebody battered you, assaulted you, damaged your property, how would you seek remedy? In other words, how and to whom would you go to enforce your rights or to seek redress?
Right. So practically in the system that we live in, I would probably utilize the court system, but before I used the court system, if I knew who that individual was, I would try to go to them and reason with them and deal with them one-on-one. Because the reason why I say that is because that's actually how the Bible describes that we're supposed to deal with one another. It says, if you there remember that you have something against your brother, go leave your gift in front of the altar and go make your peace with your brother. You see, if he listens to you, you have gained him. If he doesn't, then you involve others in the process. So that as I said before, I'm a Christian sovereign constitutionalist. So first and foremost, I would incorporate what I believe as a Christian in resolving any issues. Then, I would continue the process as was necessary.
But ultimately, if you are dealing with somebody who is not acquiescent, you would go to your local or state judiciary and seek redress, or to a local law enforcement to seek redress, correct?
Yes, I could use those avenues. I could also, depend. It really depends on the situation, to be honest with you. I mean, if I'm dealing with an individual that's, out there killing people, yeah, obviously I'm going to use the system that is put in place to deal with that.
The thing is, the reason why I asked this question is because a lot of where you're coming from is dealing with this acquiescence to the system, acquiescence to the government system. And it seems to me that, you feel that, the people, in other words, an individual person like myself, myself, and I have the right to no longer become part of said system. And so, and I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm kind of cheating here. Does that mean that the people have the right to opt out of following the laws of their respective state or country of this fictional entity and still be allowed to remain within its jurisdictional territory?
Okay. That actually goes to a very important question that I have for you.
Sure.
And my question to you is, to whom does the earth belong?
Depends on who you ask.
Well, I'm asking you.
God.
Okay. We would agree that God owns the earth. So what was God's intention for the earth, for man, based upon what we know or what you've accepted?
What? I'm sorry, say that again?
What was God's original intention for man as it pertains to the earth?
Go forth and multiply. It's been a long time since I've opened up the Bible, to be honest.
Okay, I understand. So here's why I'm asking this question. I'll use an example to illustrate what I'm getting at. So let's say God left us a house and we're all his children. And with that house, there was an attached property. Wouldn't we assume that if God said, okay, I'm leaving you this, you all need to share it equally, and nobody has any favoritism over one over the other, that each individual would have an equal right to use that as they saw fit?
Well, I don't know if I would accept that in an interpretation, because as far as my understanding of the Bible, nations existed.
Well, okay.
I mean,
What
Rome,
you're saying,
for example, was very clearly in the Bible, was it not? And that was considered a sovereign state during that era.
so in the case of Rome, you have what Jesus says: pay Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God. But now here's the question: what really are Caesar's? I mean, if you get down to it, what belongs to Caesar?
Whatever Caesar decrees.
So if Caesar decrees that your life belongs to him, it belongs to him?
Well, that's according to Caesar. Yeah.
So if Caesar decrees that the earth belongs to him, the earth belongs to him?
I'm sure that's something that he would love to say.
Right. But we both know, and uh, most individuals would agree, that even Caesar's life doesn't even belong to him. Okay? Now, Jesus did clarify, as regards to the money that Caesar used, whose image was on there. Okay, so putting an image or a mark on something is a way of claiming ownership of something. That was something that was done back then. But when we really get down to it, the earth belongs to God, and every individual on this earth belongs to God. Now, as regards to these kingdoms, various kingdoms, we do observe in Scripture where Satan, when tempting Christ, offers these kingdoms. Well, he couldn't offer something that didn't belong to him. So I would agree that, there are kingdoms here on earth, but those kingdoms, their true operator or individual that is behind it, I would say, based upon Scripture, is Satan, basically. But
here's you. I think I kind of understand where you're coming from, but here's the thing: at the end of the day, if my car is getting stolen, I don't have the resources to find out who took my car and get it back. And I am not going to expect God to come down and tell me where my car is. So I'm going to rely on the resources available to me, to my local government, because I have recognized property rights. In other words, they know that, yeah, you're right, some rando can't take your car that you have title to, and we're going to have an investigation to try and get it back. Or in the alternative, I can file a suit against somebody who wrecks me from behind at a stoplight and saying, hey, this guy committed a damage against me. I'm not going to rely on God to get my retribution, to get my remedy. I have to rely on my fellow man to enforce the rights given to me by God. And I think that's a fact of life that one has to accept. And by accepting that understanding, it goes hand in hand with understanding that I'm also subject to those rights and privileges and obligations that come from that state.
Well, so you're saying, basically that if one turns to authorities to resolve a matter, that they're now making themselves subject to it. And I don't find that to be, a reasonable determination, because basically, first of all, I mean, these systems were established to protect our rights. They were not established for the purpose of controlling everything that we do. And sadly, where we're at nowadays, especially with this coronavirus stuff, everything is up in the air. Whereas before, even people that accepted that the Constitution was, the most important law of the land, well, now even the Constitution is drawn into question, because now you have a manufactured safety concern that ultimately is being used to inhibit the constitutional rights of the people. So I would very much disagree with you as regards to that.
Well, the thing is that when we're talking about the protection of rights and the understanding of obligations, again, this is not a new concept of civil society. The thing is that instead of having an absolute monarch who is sovereign with the people having no say in the state of their affairs, in our system of government, we at the very least have the ability to elect our representatives who pass these laws, or to elect our executives who enforce those laws. And as members of the people, members of the citizenry, we have a greater say in who is governing our affairs. And so if we have an issue with how our respective authority is governing our affairs, we have that ability to have our voices heard, either through a petition for redress of grievances or through the ballot box. That is how our civil society works. And I understand that still may entail that the legislature may pass laws that we don't agree with. Sure as hell don't agree with a lot of certain laws that my state government passes, but that does not mean that just because I don't like it, or I think that they're not correct, does not mean that I am free to opt out of whatever selective law that I personally feel is inappropriate. And to suggest that that's an option would be to basically embrace anarchy, in my opinion.
Right. So basically, what that's actually going into is the consent to be governed. And so I do have a recording I also wanted to share with that. And this is actually from a judge, Napolitano. And he actually addresses the consent to be governed. And I'd like to play that and get your feedback.
Is it consent to be governed or consent of the governed?
Right. So it's the consent of the governed, basically what it is.
All right. So, give me 2 minutes. I'll be right back. Give me 2 minutes and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, so this is again a recording of Judge Napolitano addressing the consent to be governed.
Of natural rights was most prominently laid out by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence right at the beginning of the document. We hold these truths to be self-evident, he wrote, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is probably the most famous phrase in the English language, but the words that immediately follow may be the most important. Here's what it says. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Okay, what is the consent of the governed? Natural rights are inherent to your humanity and the source of your sovereignty as a free individual. If you believe in God as I do and Jefferson did, then you accept the truism that we have been created by him in his image and likeness, and just as he is perfectly free, so are we. If you believe instead that we are the product of natural evolutionary forces and not the intentional recipients of gifts from a loving supreme being, you also recognize that we own our minds and our bodies, and we have the free will to use them as we see fit. Either way, whether you choose theology or biology as the source of our rights. The birth of America in the Declaration of Independence recognized that our rights come from within us. They are not given to us by the government. You have a right to your person, to your property, and to your version of the pursuit of happiness. You also have the right to think as you wish, to say what you think, and to publish what you say. You have the right to use violence to protect yourself from anyone or anything trying to take away your rights. You have the right to privacy, to fairness from the government, the right to travel, to worship or not to worship. You have the right to keep and enjoy your earnings and your property, and you have the right to be left alone. All humans have these rights, but sometimes bad and power-hungry people will try to take these rights away. A thief in the night will use a gun or a crowbar to steal your car. A thief in the government will use the law to steal your income. You get the picture. The Declaration of Independence talks about government receiving its just powers from the consent of the governed. It is describing the process by which we transfer a portion of our natural rights to the government. The process by which we each give away some of our freedom, some of our individual sovereignty, and thus give to the government its authority to govern. What's important to note about this process is that according to the Declaration of Independence, it is supposed to be voluntary and consensual. That's why government can only wield those powers which the individual is at liberty to wield and to give to the government. Think of it this way. You can't steal a car from your neighbor, and so your friends can't hire an agent to go out and steal from your neighbor either. And thus you and your friends cannot empower the government to do the stealing. Again, I think you get the point. Lawful government only has the powers that we once had and we lawfully gave to the government. Just as slaves have the moral and legal right to leave those enslaving them, just as the states have the moral and legal right to leave a union that violates the Constitution that binds them, so too you have the moral right to live without a government when it breaks its own laws. The federal government claims your consent through the Constitution. The Constitution is a social contract that binds the American people to their government. Did you freely consent to this? I don't know anybody who did. So since none of us consented to the Constitution, either the government stays within the confines of the Constitution, or we can ignore or change the government. This view, called the consent of the governed, was widely and openly accepted by the framers. They gave us a Constitution which defines, limits, and constrains the government. This is why adherence to the Constitution by all government is so crucial to preserving and retaining our freedoms. The Constitution formalizes the relationship between sovereign people and sovereign states and the federal government. When the Constitution is ignored, so is our sovereignty. If we can't avoid a government to which we never gave consent and which violates the Constitutions, so will our freedoms be ignored.
Okay. So I'd like you to respond to what Judge Napolitano says as regards to our right.
You want me to start debating Judge Napolitano? All right.
Not debating, just your response to what he is saying as regards to the consent of the governed.
I think Napolitano forgot the fact that the Constitution was ratified not from the consent of every single solitary colonist in the respective colonies or the respective states, but by a majority of each member of the white property-owning male population of those respective states. So from there, the Constitution was established. The state constitutions were themselves established and ratified by the respective citizenry, and became the law of the land. I don't know if what Napolitano is trying to say is correct. He is suggesting that at every moment when somebody reaches the age of majority, they have the ability to say, hey, okay, you're now 18 or 17, what have you. Are you going to follow the laws of the United States or the state of New Jersey? And if somebody says no, then nothing happens. They're free to do whatever it pleases them, unless and until something they do harms another person physically. But even then, however, with that said, he says that people can opt out of the Constitution. Well, guess what? That means that you also opt out of the protections that the Constitution affords you. So if you're going to opt out of the Constitution, you can't therefore refer to the Constitution if your rights are eventually violated by somebody else who also decided they wanted to opt out. Say, I want to opt out, and what? I don't give a shit about your property, and I'm going to take your car. You can't therefore say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go to my local government for a redress of grievances because this guy took my car, or he shafted me out of a contract deal because you opted out. You don't get the protections as you would just because you decided that you didn't want to be a part of the system. So that's where I'm going to respond to Judge Napolitano. Just to conclude, his idea of a personal individual consent requirement is patently absurd to the point where, like I said before, it would invite anarchy if it meant that somebody had the freedom to opt out of whatever law or whatever constitution they don't like, or central government they don't like, yet still remain within its territorial borders.
Well, then basically that's a denial to individual sovereignty. You see, you're basically saying that man-made states, have greater authority than those that created them, or not even created them, but just basically said, hey, this area belongs to us because we say so.
I didn't say that people aren't sovereign.
Then I guess the question is, what does it mean to be sovereign?
Sovereign means that you still have a say in the affairs of government. You can, again, petition for a redress. You have the ability to vote for your representative, for your executive, who makes and enforces those laws. In most states, you have the ability to vote for the judges who interpret those laws. Not here in New Jersey, but I digress. So this people still have the power to have a say in who governs their affairs, and in doing so, in addition to that, the sovereignty of the people is still respected as under the rights that are enumerated under the Bill of Rights. If you didn't have a Fourth Amendment protection of searches and seizures, then the Fourth Amendment wouldn't exist if the Constitution didn't regard the people as having some level of sovereignty. Let's put it that way.
Well, come on. Let's be honest, Artie. Ever since the government decided that it was okay to spy on its citizens, the Fourth Amendment went out the door. Now, come on. Let's just be honest. I understand what you're saying, but the problem is that as long as individual sovereignty doesn't have the freedom to govern itself, then it's not sovereignty. And we could take a look at the state of Hawaii as a perfect example. I mean, how did Hawaii become a state? It was forced upon them by, threatened by killing its people and forcing statehood upon them. They didn't ask to be a state. You see, so this idea that these states, have this authority is only a belief that is forced upon the people by the threat of violence. I mean, if I were to ask you, why aren't you following the laws of China? You would say, well, I'm not in China. But how does the government there own that piece of land when it belongs to God? It doesn't belong to China. America, the land of America, doesn't belong to America. It belongs to God. And until we understand that this planet doesn't belong to man, until we understand that even our own lives do not belong to us, then we will never understand the way things are supposed to be. Because we're supposed to be able to live in harmony. Go ahead.
Here's the thing. But here's what it comes down to: brass tacks. Regardless of who owns this earth, who owns my life, who owns everybody's life, the fact of the matter is, we are going to have, throughout human history, we have situations where, people are governed under other man is governed by other men. That's
slavery. That's slavery.
How is that slavery? No. Am I being forced to work under the state?
Yes, you are.
How?
Yes, you are. You're being forced to work in a system to be able to buy and sell within that system. And if you try to go outside that system, you're now a threat to its existence. Okay? So
I can leave the system if I want. I just have to leave the country. I just have to leave the territorial borders, right?
But therein lies the lie and deception right there. Because it presumes that this area, this landmass, belongs to the government. It doesn't. I mean...
Well, the government, like I said, government. You seem to honestly. I feel like you are relying on a utopian ideal of there being no more nation states in existence, but the problem is that that's not going to happen. Government is not going to go away tomorrow, and so if we're going to have government, and if we're going to have a system in which we have people who create laws governing others and governing the behavior of others, i.e. thievery, theft, murder, stealing, etc., then it would be best to have a government in which the majority of the people to which is going to be subject to said government has a large say in how that government is formed, how it's operated, and what laws that government is going to pass. And so that's why we go, I would say I would much rather be here in the United States and govern and subject to the laws of the United States, because at the very least here I have some semblance of rights that can be protected or enforced, or I have at least a semblance of a say in who is governing my affairs as compared to, say, China. I think ultimately you're advocating something that's not going to happen.
Well, I would disagree with you on that principle because, the Bible says it will happen, but ultimately, I would say to you that, you said yourself that, well, we can't just opt out to not to be bound to the limits of the Constitution. Well, the same applies for the government. Okay. If you want to go that route, the same would apply. Now, the simple fact of the matter is, our government has exceeded its constitutional limitations in many ways. So, if it were, as Judge Napolitano said it was, a contract between the government and the people, the government has breached that contract in multiple ways. Okay? So, once that contract has been breached, it's null and void. So, I mean, I understand that, we disagree. You believe that it's necessary to be part of that system. And I would say that,
because
God
how else are my
created
rights going to be protected? That's why. How else are my rights going to be protected other than mob rule or taking the law, as a word in quotes, into my own hands?
Right. So I understand what you're saying when you say utopian, but you know what? If it is utopian, it's what Jesus advocated, because Jesus said that the fulfillment of the law and the prophets is this, that we love one another and that we love God. Now, if we, and this is something I wanted to say also to all those that are watching, one of the things that I find to be very sad is that we can't just be respectful to each other and accept that we disagree on some things. And so many a times we'll see individuals refer to sovereigns in varying disparaging ways and actually making fun of them. Oh, let's see how they respond when they're tased, or this or that, or when they get their windshield busted in by the local police department. The thing is I do believe in the law of love. I do believe that if we all take that and make that the way we choose to go about, then we're not going to do things that hurt each other. In fact, we'll actually do things to help each other. And that is really what Christ advocated. And that's what I advocate. And so the government doesn't have such a law. And my big beef with the government is that it tries to profit off of a lot of the laws that it wants to demand that we follow. And so I don't accept them on many occasions because they do violate individual sovereignty of rights and freedoms.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can see that. On my channel, I make fun. I take the piss and I have a laugh, but I'm also capable of having a discussion. As we are now, as I was last week, and as if you see my other videos with root words, I can have a civil discussion. More of my ire against certain members of this group is reserved towards those who profit off of other people, those who sell legal defense kits, for $500 a pop, saying, "Hey, just follow this stuff, and you'll be able to get out of your traffic case, or you'll be able to successfully fight your foreclosure." Ultimately leaving the people homeless at the end of the day because they thought that this methodology was going to work. That's where most of my ire comes from. But I digress.
Yeah.
But I do understand where you're coming from in the sense of, it's easier. It's easier to just say we agree to disagree. But going let's circle back here a bit, and I want to circle back to Mike, this is one of my last questions, if not the last question that I have on here.
Okay.
In a video here is in a video you uploaded on July 11th, 2020, you asserted that the determination by a state's motor vehicle agency that driving, operating, traveling with your car was a privilege was improper. However, to give you as an example, in New Jersey, the law, not the regulation, but New Jersey state law explicitly states that this person may not operate a motor vehicle without having a license. Further, that same statute also imposes a fee on obtaining a license. Now, do you think that this statute was passed by the Motor Vehicle Commission in the state of New Jersey, or was it passed by the legislature, who in turn gives the MVC power to enforce that fee requirement and that license requirement?
Okay, so there's a couple things there. And so, I don't, it really doesn't matter what state it is, but here's the problem. This is why it's so important that we understand what the Ninth Amendment means. So if a state can, by its decision, simply, arbitrarily deny and disparage unenumerated rights simply by making up a law that it says, well, we're going to require this, the problem that presents is it doesn't deal with it from a Ninth Amendment issue. Okay, and I could understand why, a state may not understand that because of the lack of foundation that the Supreme Court has really built upon the Ninth. And so, but we have to understand where these unenumerated rights come from. And, based upon the Ninth Amendment itself, it clearly states that these unenumerated rights are retained by the people. So now I understand that there are people that choose to be represented by these states, but the 10th Amendment clearly demonstrates that there are, that these powers, they are reserved to states, but it also gives a provision there that it can also be reserved to the people. And that's really why it's important to understand that we, the people, have 10th Amendment powers. It's not just delegated to the states alone. And when you understand that, the real sovereignty comes from the people, not the man-made states that men decided, hey, let's carve out this piece of land and say it's such and such, and we're going to establish a system of rule here.
But those men, but those men were elected by the people to make that decision, were they not?
So those who choose to elect them, yes, they can choose to accept that. Those who do not, that choose not to consent to that, do not have to be part of that. It's just like people, choosing, to have.
But at that rate, you're basically advocating for an absolute democracy. You are saying that that unless 100% of the citizenry agree to a law, then the law is invalid based upon whoever decides that they're not going to adhere to it. I mean, is that really what you're suggesting here?
What I'm suggesting is that, if there's a law that people choose to accept, that's for them to accept. There are people that side on varying issues on a lot of things that we disagree about. Let's take, for example, the situation with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You have people that are liberal and you have people that are conservative, completely disagree. And simply by putting someone in that seat is going to change the dynamic for a lot of people. You see, and you're telling, let's assume that a conservative justice gets put in there.
Okay.
Now you're telling all the liberal people, well, now you're going to have to accept this because, hey, we just put someone in there.
Well,
and I'm telling you.
Well, going into that's part of what we consider to be the rule of law, right? Without a concept of the rule of law and the people acquiescing to, even if I don't agree with the law, I still understand it and respect it and adhere to it because that is a founding concept. Without that, again, I get, this is probably the third time if you're saying that I don't have to buy into that because I personally, individually disagree with it, it invites ultimately anarchy.
Well, anarchy is a word some may use, others may choose to use the word freedom. But, ultimately, that is exactly what the founding fathers did when they chose to go against the legal system, the lawful system that was held over them. They chose anarchy, did they not?
No.
Well, I mean,
the founding fathers were not anarchists. The founding fathers rejected the rule of the king in Great Britain because they felt that their voices were not being heard by Parliament. And they in turn decided that we want to form a government in which the people, i.e. the colonists, have a greater say in the governing of our affairs. Right? Hello? Uh-oh. Hello? Oh, crap. Now it's my turn. Hello? Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hello? Can you hear me? ArchAngel? You guys can hear me, right? Yeah. I didn't kick him. My thing got disconnected. I tried to reconnect. Uh-oh. And he's gone. What was I saying even? And Juan, Gald, you are correct. He kind of went off into it when I was trying to go into the. I was trying to get us back into the right to travel issue that section that he was asking, and he didn't answer my question. Or he in at least two of his videos, he very specifically stated that the motor vehicle commissions were unlawfully or improperly resorting the right to travel or right to drive into a privilege because they issued fees in order to get a license, out of their own volition. But I tried to go into this saying that Well, in New Jersey, for example, the state statute, in other words, the statute itself says that, you are required to have a license. And the statute itself also says that you are required to pay a fee in order to get said license. In other words, it's the legislature, who in turn was voted by the people, who got the, who stated that these are, that you're required to get a license, not the MVC, not the agency. The agency didn't get this out of nowhere. They got their authority to enforce these rules from the legislature. That's what I'm saying. And apparently Google Meets is fucking me over. Uh-oh. Well, I'm effed. Then I also wanted to point out that the Supreme Court has already decided the issue of the right to travel. What the hell is going on? Is my stream still running right? Y'all can still see me in the stream, right? I'm not getting Comcasted, am I? Okay, so it's Google Meet that's screwing me. Look, this fucking, don't get me started on Comcast, okay? Lord knows that they've screwed over my gaming live streams more than once. But yeah, apparently Google Meets is deciding not to work anymore. What happens is Comcast will randomly decide to eliminate my upload bandwidth, like completely obliterate it, and would just kill my live stream. So that's why I'm saying, am I getting Comcasted? And now apparently Google Meet is down. Yeah, basically. So I had well, I was going to say that Carly and Hamilton Incorporated versus Snook 281 US 66 allowed a state to issue a fee for registering your car. Kane versus New Jersey 242 US 160 licensing fees are valid under the Constitution. I mean, among other things, Kendrick versus Maryland. Damn it, I know, Juan. I know Discord never has issues. But so, all right, I think I might be effed. Should have used Bing. I don't want to end this now, because I want to give him at least a closing argument or at least a closing statement. I want to give him that much, but I can't even get the meeting back up and running for some reason. All right. My mic looks like a beard extension. Probably. All right, yeah. Google Meet apparently has shut down. So, I apologize to ArchAngel. We may have to continue this on another date if you're seeing this. So I apologize. And I think what I'm gonna do is, what time is it? 9 o'clock. You know what? I think if you guys are open, you know, I think I'm gonna have ArchAngel, if you're on here, okay, I see you on here. I can't get onto Google Meet anymore. Like, it's giving me a 502 error, and it's not loading at all. So it's maybe screwed for you. It's screwed for me as well. So I might have to call it a night here. What I'm gonna do is I am going to have an after show on my Discord. And what is that Discord link? Do I have a Discord link? I don't have a Discord link. What the hell's wrong with me? And, you know, if you guys want to talk about tonight's discussion, feel free to chime in. There's a link to my Discord. I'll be on there until, I don't know, 10 o'clock, 10:30. We can have a discussion there. ArchAngel, I don't think we're going to be able to come back again, so we'll have to do this another time. Hit me up via email. We'll go from there. But I thank you guys for watching. Thank you very much, ArchAngel, for dropping in to talk. I think we had at least a productive conversation. We actually at least understood where we're coming from. Sorry you had to head this way, but hopefully we can have a conclusion at a later date. We'll probably use another method than Google, apparently. So, yep, check me out on Discord. I'll be on there. Thanks, guys, for watching. Much appreciated. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you when I see you on the next time. All right? Take care, guys. Thanks again for watching. Much appreciated. Have a good night.